Hello, welcome to Purple Jam Limited's vlog this week. This is Harry talking. I thought I'd give a quick update on the combat system that we've been working on for a little while now. Firstly, to update a detective's Demise with, and secondly, to feature in the first episode and future episodes of the main game coming out around March time. Now, the system we implemented into a detective's Demise was really rather simple in that you could swipe left or right depending on where the attack was coming from, and if you successfully dodged 3 times, you would defeat the thug you were facing. In the future update, what we wanted to do was create a system that had a much more significant capacity for tactical play. And so a much more complex mechanic. The goal here is to allow the player to create a strategy based on a simple set of rules, but that set of rules has significant depth. Now the approach we've taken to achieve that is by implementing a parry system, like you might find in Assassin's Creed or a large number of other games, a slow attack and a fast attack, as well as taunting. Now when the enemy fast attacks, that's parryable, but it's quite hard to parry because the amount of time you have to parry that attack is quite short, and the harder the combat becomes later on in the game you get, the shorter that time will become. But if you do manage to parry the attack, you're then open for attack themselves, for either a fast attack by the player or a slow attack if they're at an appropriate distance. Now enemies can also slowly attack, but that has a much greater range, and so the player is unable to parry that slower attack when they're at full range, which means that the enemy before going into a slow attack has a push maneuver. So the player can either then take a risk and move in with just enough time so that they may be able to parry the slow attack at the end of the attack cycle, or they can move out of the way to avoid getting hit altogether. So it's a sort of risk-reward series of scenarios that can take place. The combat's also free roaming, which means that you're not taken into a sort of separate cutscene or separate minigame type of thing. You'll be able to move around the world. And what we're hoping to achieve in certain areas, so not in the sewers or when you're fighting a guard, but more so perhaps in the city level, is that if you choose to run away, then the game allows you to do that. You don't have to get in a fight if you didn't want to. Now, in future weeks, we'll actually be giving a demo of this system. We had completed a simplistic version with just the parry and fast attack, but after demoing it a bit ourselves, we decided this didn't give the player enough strategic options. And even when you have multiple enemies, it didn't feel as if it had the depth that we wanted. Now, all these things are very standard for combat systems. I mean, we wanted to make sure that we were doing something with audio that you wouldn't be able to do with visuals. That's sort of one of the main goals of the game and for our company generally. And so in order to make full use of the binaural audio, we've also implemented a angle system within the combat. So you're only going to hit the enemy if they're relatively centered. You're only going to parry the enemy's attack if they're relatively centered, as in centered between your ears when you're turning around the player. And if you go for an attack when they're not centered, that's then going to sort of make you stumble and put you at risk of the enemy attacking. So essentially you have this sort of free roaming, fairly fast paced situation where you have to move around to dodge slower attacks, or perhaps move out of range of fast attacks, whilst making sure that the enemy is still centered so that you can parry and get in for an attack yourself at the appropriate time. Thanks very much for listening, and we look forward to bringing you more content later this week.